Okay, so when I'm starting a business, I may start with one person, me. But I need to build a team if I'm going to deliver a product or a service. How do I put together a team? What kind of capabilities do they need to have? And how do I retain that core team and the people I subsequently employ? As a small startup, that seems like a big challenge to me.
All right, let's start with partners. When you start a business, when you start, let's say, a private limited company, there are two documents that you prepare. One is called Memorandum of Articles, which says this is how this company would be operated. Second is called a shareholders agreement. It says this is how we will divide what comes in. So it's very important for you to get these two documents finalized, even if you don't have a private limited company. So I go out and say that starting a private limited company may cost you 50, 60, 70,000 rupees. Shutting it down is a nightmare. It costs you $500,000 rupees on a good day, unless and until you're able to benefit from a amnesty scheme. So you don't start off with a private limited company. So you start off with two people sitting in a room saying, let's go out and do this. Now the question is, if things go under and they go under very, very quickly, that's really good for everybody because there's nothing at stake. I put in 3 months, you put in 3 months, you don't work out, we walked away from it. But if things succeed, so suddenly the stupid concept that you thought you were playing with as a prank turns into a $2 billion business that gets acquired by Google for $100 million, then you have a problem. Because then should the right split be 50-50, 40-60, 60-40, 30-70, 80-20? What was your contribution? What was my contribution? Is that fair? Is that right? Is that not right? So this is where all of these problems come from. So one of the things that you have to look at very, very carefully is that the partner that you're adding, what is his contribution? What is contribution likely to be? And how is his contribution going to reflect in the ultimate equity ownership of the business, as well as any payoff that happens at a certain point in time? Now, in our local market, acquisitions are rare, and there are lots of reasons for that. But if you expect that we'll build this and it'll get acquired by somebody for X $million and we'll both be rich and famous, that is not the most likely scenario. Right? The most likely scenario is that you will build something and it will sell, and revenues will come in. And from those revenues, some costs will be taken out and something will be left over, and those profits will get distributed. Your most likely immediate future payout is going to be a profit distribution or a revenue distribution rather than a sale of the company's equity. Right? So one of the questions that comes up is that if I do a deal and that deal is worth 10 million rupees and our cost of doing that deal is 2 million rupees, so our total profit on that deal is 8 million rupees, how does that get distributed? So the person who booked the deal, how much does he get? So actually close the deal, the sales actually close the deal. The person who did the introduction, how much does he get? Right? The person who did the work, how much does he get? What portion do you take aside and put aside for future reserves? Just because you've done one $10 million deal this year does not mean that you'll do the same thing again next year. So should you take a certain amount and put it aside? And then what portion actually gets distributed to all the shareholders who put money to start this business? These are all questions that become important when you actually have real money. And I've sort of been doing this for about 15-20 years now. And what I've realized is that unless and until there is a very clear-cut, firm agreement in writing from day one, most partnerships will not last. And they'll not last. The biggest reason why they'll not last is when money starts coming in, you can't agree on distribution. They may not last because you thought you'd be great to work together on a project of this sort, but when you actually start working, you find out that you can't work together because of temperament or personality or work ethics. You thought that I would make a certain contribution and I disappoint you by not making that contribution. You thought that I'll carry my weight in terms of doing the work and I don't share that burden of work. You thought I'll open certain doors and I don't open those. Those are lots of things that can go wrong.
Or even something simple like change of interest. Maybe you were interested in becoming an entrepreneur, but now you're not.
Yeah.
Or you want to do something totally different.
So, the pain that we thought or the expectations that we had, they were different. Or, very, very simple question. You come out of an undergraduate program, your market value is 30,000 rupees a month. You give that up, not an issue. You do this work for 6 months and you work on a very exciting technology. You get paid nothing. That's also not a problem, right? But then something changes in your family or in your circumstances or your support network, or you, out of the blue, you get an offer to work for Google for $100,000 in the US. So, 30,000 rupees a month in Karachi, saying no to that is different. Working for Google in California at $100,000 a year, saying no to that is a very different story. And it's not just about money. You might just get a scholarship. You might get a Fulbright scholarship to do your master's in computer science, and you may decide, this is more important right now for me to do than to do what I'm doing right now. There might be a simple conflict of interest. Somebody that you thought would be great fun to work with and was great fun to work with in college turns out to be, psychotic schizophrenic at work with a bipolar disorder. So there are lots of variations that you realize are not going to work. Having a clear-cut agreement that allows you to distribute value on the basis of who's contributed it, and having a clear-cut agreement on that makes a big difference.
Okay, so this is okay for partners. What about employees, straightforward employees, people that you hire to deliver on whatever project or product you're working on?
It's very rare for you to hold on to somebody for more than 2 years. So you should not expect people to stay beyond 2 years.
How do you attract them into a startup in the first place?
I think
especially the brightest people.
There are 3 or 4 things. I think first thing you have to understand is that nobody wants to work for a loser. Everybody wants to work for a winner. So you have to, however you do this, you have to project the image of a winner. And there are lots of things. You can win the P SHA awards, you can create visibility, you can get written about, you can do interesting things, so there are 10 things that you can do so that people start talking about what you are doing. So this is one very important aspect. Now when it comes to bringing in the brightest and the smartest and the sharpest, it's sort of a chicken and egg problem. You first have to ensure that people understand that it is next to impossible to get into this organization. If you're easy to get into, nobody wants to come in. But if you're next to impossible to get into, then people at least think about applying. Second, you have to create an environment or an atmosphere where they are challenged, where the work that they're doing is not ordinary work, it's extraordinary work. And it is work along the lines of their personal interest and their professional development. Now when I say nobody stays for, it's very difficult to retain people for beyond or more than 2 years. One of the reasons is that people come from very different backgrounds. So you hire a fresh graduate will ultimately go and do his masters. If he plans on doing his masters from outside Pakistan, you will lose him in 2 years. If he decides to do his masters from Pakistan, from the city that you're based in, and ideally goes to an evening program, you're possibly able to retain him till he finishes his masters. So rather than 2 years, if he starts his masters a year later, you might be able to retain him for 3 years. Once he's done with his masters, he may want to do or get into a different role in a different space, in a different environment. If he wants to work outside Pakistan, you lose him again. Even if he wants to work in Pakistan, he may not longer want to work as a developer. He want to work as an analyst, a team lead, or a project manager. So the second thing that you can do is, besides giving them work that's interesting, is you can also create a roadmap that allows them to grow personally and professionally. And that gets difficult in small organizations. Right? So the best thing that you can possibly do is project the image of a winner. do interesting work. Make it difficult for people to come into the organization by making sure, and when I say make it difficult, I'm not talking about artificial difficulties. I'm saying, test them to their limit. People enjoy working with and for bright people. And one way of communicating that is through your testing, hiring and interviewing process. So if you can cover that, then that helps a great deal. Third, create a roadmap that allows them to grow personally and professionally. And fourth, set your expectations appropriately. You will lose them in 2 years. You're not going to stay beyond 2 years. If you build a product business, this becomes interesting, because in a product business, your products are normally done in about 2 years' time. So then you just need to maintain them. So you may start with a larger pool, but by the time you get to your 2-year benchmark, the product is mostly done, and you can live with a much smaller pool. In a services business, this becomes an issue, because by the time the person gets trained, it's about a year or so. By the time he gets to a point where customers are comfortable and happy with him, it's time for him to go. And then you need to replace him by a replacement who does exactly the same thing again and again and again. So some pluses and some minuses, but I think that's what I would look at.
How do you attract more women to come into the technology industry, into the ICT sector? And interestingly, do you think you're more likely to attract women into a company if you are a social enterprise?
No. I think 2 things. One is you have to do flexible hours.
Okay.
Right? So you have to respect the fact that they may be able to start as early as 8, but they cannot work beyond a certain time. So ideally, somewhere between 4 and 6, you have to let them go. If they want to work from 8 to 12, then allow them to work from 8 to 12. I think the single biggest factor that can immediately change the percentage of women that are employed by your organization is flexi timings. If you can do flexi timings, you'll find that you attract a lot more very, very talented professionals who right now cannot work because they have other obligations that they cannot walk away from. That's one. Second, respect. Some of the smartest, sharpest, most productive people in this organization were women. If I look at the contribution made if I look at the top 3 or 4 individuals who contributed to the success and growth of Alchemy as a business, I'd say all 3 of them were women. So the top 3 on my list were all women. So I'd say if you respect, provide an environment that allows them flexibility, B, respect them, respect their work, C, again, give them opportunity to grow both personally and professionally, and D, acknowledge the contribution they've made. Don't sort of sidetrack it or sideline it. If you can get these 3 or 4 things done, I think you can have a dramatic impact in the percentage of women that work for you in your organization.
Great.